The rain came down like a curtain of silver threads, relentless and heavy, drowning the streets in its fury. Cars splashed through puddles, their headlights cutting through the sheets of water, horns blaring in frustration at the slow-moving traffic. The city was restless, yet lonely at the same time. People hurried past with umbrellas and raincoats, desperate to escape the storm and reach somewhere warm. But among them, in the shadows of a street corner where the light from a broken lamp flickered weakly, there was a figure that seemed out of place, forgotten by the rushing world. Inside a sleek black car with tinted windows, Catherine Hughes leaned back against the leather seat, scrolling through her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, replying to emails and signing off final decisions on contracts that would bring her company another multi-million-dollar profit. At 47 years old, Catherine was one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country, a billionaire whose name carried weight in every corporate circle. Her hair, perfectly styled even after a long day, gleamed under the dim lights of the car interior, and her tailored navy suit was as impeccable as her reputation. She had just come from a towering glass building where she had finalized a deal that would secure her company's dominance for the next decade. Normally, victories like these called for champagne, laughter with her board members, and perhaps a quiet moment of pride. But tonight, she felt unusually restless. Success, though sweet, felt strangely hollow. She told herself it was just exhaustion, that she needed rest. Yet something within her stirred, as if waiting for a sign she couldn't name. As her car rolled slowly through the rain-soaked streets, Catherine's eyes drifted from her glowing screen to the world outside. Raindrops streamed down the glass, blurring the images into moving watercolor paintings. For a second, she almost missed it. Just a faint shape, hunched low on the sidewalk, barely noticeable among the shadows. But then she saw the movement, the trembling of small hands, the weak wail of children that somehow carried even through the storm. Her eyes narrowed, she leaned forward, peering past the raindrops, and her heart caught in her throat. There, kneeling on the soaked pavement, was a girl. She could not have been more than 20, her hair plastered to her pale face, her thin frame shivering violently under the merciless downpour. She wore a faded dress, the kind that might have once been pretty but now was nothing more than rags clinging to her body. In her arms, no, not one child, not two, but 3 tiny babies were wrapped in what looked like thin, worn blankets, utterly insufficient against the cold. The babies were whimpering, their little lips trembling, their faces scrunched up from hunger and chill. One of them gave a faint cough that made the girl clutch him tighter against her chest. She didn't cry out to passers-by, didn't extend her hand to demand money as so many beggars did. Instead, she sat there in silence, a piece of soggy cardboard propped beside her with words scrawled in faint, smudged ink, "Please, they're hungry." Catherine's chest tightened. She had seen poverty before, who hadn't in a city like this? People asking for coins at traffic lights, men sleeping under bridges, women with hollow eyes sitting on curbs. She had trained herself to look away, to tell herself she donated enough to charities, that she wasn't responsible for every stranger's misfortune. But tonight, she couldn't look away. Something about this girl was different. Maybe it was the way she didn't shout or chase people down. Maybe it was the way her arms wrapped around those babies as if shielding them from the whole cruel world. Or maybe it was the quiet despair in her eyes when she glanced up, eyes that looked too old for someone so young. "Stop the car," Catherine said suddenly. Her driver, startled, glanced back at her in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, stop the car," she repeated firmly, her voice sharper now. The car pulled over to the curb, tires hissing against the wet road. Catherine slipped her phone into her purse, adjusted her jacket, and without hesitation pushed open the door. A blast of cold, wet air hit her immediately, soaking her heels as they landed in a growing puddle. The rain plastered her expensive suit against her shoulders within seconds, but she didn't care. Her eyes were fixed on the girl at the corner. The young woman looked up, startled, as Catherine approached. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but had no strength left. The babies stirred in her arms, one letting out a soft, pitiful cry. Catherine crouched down so their eyes met. Up close, the girl's face was even more haunting. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale from malnutrition, her hair tangled and dripping. Yet her eyes, large, dark, and glistening with tears, still carried something fierce. Not anger, not bitterness, but a desperate, protective love for the children clinging to her chest. Catherine's throat tightened. She tried to keep her voice steady as she asked, "Where is your family? Where is their father?" The girl's eyes dropped to the ground, her chin quivering. She whispered, her voice almost drowned out by the rain, "He left us, the day they were born. I've been surviving on scraps. I thought I could manage somehow. But tonight," her words broke off as her shoulders shook. "Tonight, I don't know if they will." The sound of it pierced Catherine deeper than she expected. She had heard countless sob stories before, people twisting words to win sympathy. But this girl wasn't performing. She wasn't begging for her own sake. She was breaking in front of her, raw and unfiltered, because she had nothing left to give her babies. Catherine glanced at the children. Their little hands poked out of the thin blankets, fingers curled and trembling. Their lips had taken on a bluish tinge, a dangerous sign in such cold weather. One of them let out a faint wail that quickly faded into a weak whimper, the kind of cry that came when exhaustion had stolen the strength even from hunger. Catherine felt her chest ache. Memories she had long buried threatened to rise, the emptiness of her own life, the silence of a house too large and too quiet, the ache she sometimes felt when she saw mothers with children. She had chosen her career, chosen power, chosen independence. And she had convinced herself she didn't need anything else. But here, on a soaked city corner, with 3 fragile lives barely clinging on, she felt a crack open inside her that she couldn't ignore. Her driver appeared behind her, holding out an umbrella. "Ma'am, please, you'll get sick. Hold it over them," Catherine snapped, gesturing toward the girl and the babies. The driver blinked but obeyed, shielding the fragile group from the rain. Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out a folded silk handkerchief, utterly useless against the storm, but still she offered it to the girl. "What's your name?" The young woman hesitated, her lips trembling before she whispered, "Maria." "Maria," Catherine repeated softly, as if anchoring the name to memory. She studied the girl, then looked again at the 3 tiny faces pressed against her chest. Something stirred deep in her, something she hadn't felt in years. She knew, in that instant, that this was no ordinary encounter. This wasn't just a girl begging in the rain. This was something else, something placed before her for a reason she didn't yet understand. And Catherine Hughes, billionaire, business mogul, a woman who had thought she had seen everything, realized she was standing at the edge of a story that could change her life forever. The car moved smoothly through the rain-soaked streets, its engine humming like a steady heartbeat, yet inside there was an unspoken tension hanging thick in the air. Catherine sat opposite the young mother, who now held her 3 babies close, their tiny forms bundled as best as she could in damp, threadbare cloths. The warmth of the luxury car's interior slowly began to push away the chill that had clung to them outside, and the triplets, sensing the sudden comfort, had ceased their weak cries. One was fast asleep, his tiny head resting against his mother's collarbone, while the other two blinked up with glassy eyes, too tired to wail but too restless to rest. Catherine found herself staring, not with judgment but with a strange pull in her chest, as if some invisible thread had tethered her to this fragile little group. She noticed the way the young woman's hands trembled, not just from the lingering cold but from sheer exhaustion. The skin on her knuckles was red and cracked, nails bitten down to nothing. Her hair, though tangled and soaked, still framed a face that had the softness of youth, though life had already carved lines of hardship into it. "What did you say your name was?" Catherine asked, her voice quieter now, stripped of the sharpness it usually carried in boardrooms. The girl raised her eyes timidly, as though afraid of saying too much, and whispered, "Maria." She shifted slightly, kissing the forehead of the sleeping baby. "This one is Daniel, and that's David." She pointed weakly to the baby whose small fist had latched onto her damp sleeve. Then her lips curved into a faint, trembling smile as she looked at the smallest, a little girl with a soft tuft of dark hair. "And my princess, Hope. Hope." The words seemed to echo inside Catherine like a bell tolling in an empty cathedral. She swallowed hard and nodded, though she didn't trust herself to speak for a moment. "Where were you planning to go tonight?" Catherine finally asked. Maria looked down at the babies, her voice breaking as she answered, "I don't know. I just walk until they're too tired to move. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, someone leaves food outside a store. Sometimes, people give me bread. But tonight, I was hoping, maybe someone would take pity." She paused, clutching the infants tighter, as if bracing herself for judgment. "I never begged for myself. Just for them." The sincerity in her words struck Catherine like a blow. In her world, words were weapons, polished, rehearsed, often twisted to conceal truth or manipulate outcomes. But Maria's words were raw, stripped bare, soaked in desperation and love. The billionaire leaned back, her eyes flickering to the raindrops streaking down the tinted window. She thought about her own life. For decades she had been driven by ambition, every step calculated, every choice a brick in the empire she had built. She had conquered competition, silenced critics, and proved herself in a world that had once sneered at the idea of a woman at the top. But what had it left her? A sprawling mansion filled with silence. Lavish parties where laughter sounded hollow. Nights when she lay awake, staring at ceilings, wondering why the victories tasted less sweet with each passing year. Her gaze drifted back to the young mother before her, and she asked gently, "How old are you, Maria?" 20, Maria said, her voice barely audible. "I should have been in college. I wanted to be a teacher. I used to love books, reading, learning, but then," her words faltered. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The babies in her arms told the rest of the story. Catherine's brows furrowed. Their father. The air in the car grew heavier. Maria's lips trembled as she forced herself to answer. "He promised me everything. He told me I was his world. When I told him I was pregnant, he swore we would raise them together. But when he realized it was 3, he panicked. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of burden. And then, he was gone." Her voice cracked, and tears slid silently down her cheeks, mixing with the dampness left from the rain. "I thought maybe he would come back. That maybe he just needed time. But he never did. He doesn't even know their names. He doesn't know hope exists. And her breath hitched, and she buried her face briefly against her daughter's tiny head before finishing. I have no parents. They died when I was 16. I worked odd jobs, anything to keep a roof over my head. But when I had them, no one would hire me. 3 mouths to feed, and only these hands to work with. She held them up, shaking, fragile, yet still clutching life with a strength Catherine couldn't help but admire. The car was silent except for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional whimper of the babies. Catherine's driver kept his eyes on the road, but even he shifted uncomfortably, the weight of Maria's story pressing down on everyone present. Catherine leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Maria's. And through all of this, you've kept them alive. Do you understand how strong that makes you? Many would have given up. Many would have left them somewhere. But you're here. You fought. Maria blinked rapidly, tears pooling in her lashes. She shook her head. I didn't fight enough. Tonight, I thought maybe I couldn't do it anymore. I was so tired, so scared. I kept thinking, what if they close their eyes and never wake up? And all I could do was sit there and pray. The word pray hit Catherine differently than she expected. She hadn't prayed in years. Not since she was a girl, when life was simpler, when she still believed in something beyond power and control. She had built her empire with her own hands, and she told herself she didn't need faith. Yet here was this girl, stripped of everything, clinging to nothing but faith and sheer willpower, and somehow she was still standing. Catherine felt her throat tighten. She reached out, hesitated, then gently laid a hand on Maria's trembling fingers. The contact was brief, but in that small gesture Catherine felt a connection, an unspoken understanding that needed no words. You won't beg again, Catherine said, her voice low but firm, carrying the same authority she used in the boardroom, but this time softened by compassion. Not while I'm alive. Maria's eyes widened in shock. She looked at Catherine as though she had just promised her the impossible. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't need to, Catherine replied. Just know that you and your babies are safe now. For a long moment, Maria said nothing, her lips trembling as fresh tears streamed down her face. But these tears were different. They weren't born of despair, but of relief so sharp it felt like breaking open. She pressed her face against her children and whispered something too quiet to hear, though Catherine caught the faint words, "Thank you, God." The car continued its journey, carrying them through the storm toward a future neither of them had expected. Catherine sat back, her heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. She realized that tonight wasn't about business, or money, or deals sealed with signatures. It was about something much deeper. She stared at the sleeping babies, at Maria's fragile but unyielding figure, and thought, maybe this is what I was meant to find. Maybe this is why I was restless, why the victory earlier felt so empty. Because I was meant to see this, to do something about it. And as the rain continued to pour outside, Catherine Hughes, the woman who had believed she already had everything, discovered that her life was about to change in ways she had never dared to imagine.